In this video, we're going to move from the cool, awesome things of a Bastion in the 2024 DMG to the parts that need a little work. Yep, get ready. We're going to take a look at what goes wrong inside the Bastion rules and what we can do about them. So let's look at some things that you might want out of a stronghold Bastion type system and whether it fits your needs. Like I mentioned in the first video, there's a long history here of these kinds of tools. And I mentioned Acquisitions Incorporated and its franchise system. I mentioned the Forbidden Lands book, which my friend recently lent to me. I mentioned the 3rd edition Stronghold Builder's Guidebook. And what I didn't mention, but is always on my mind, are these fine books by the NCDM team, Kingdoms and Warfare and Strongholds and Followers. I worked on parts of one of them, the adventure, with a whole warfare system between your land and the next. And if you look at the included adventures for both, you can get a picture of the real kind of neat example of how you might begin with some humble ruin of a place, grow it into be a formidable place, make alliances with different groups, end up with big, serious, story-rich interplay between you and other kind of nations or power groups, and how that might play out and even devolve into warfare. So there's a lot of possibility here that a game could give you. And we're going to look today at what the 2024 DMG provides for us. Gorgeous cover, by the way. I love this cover. Really beautiful. I like the standard one too. So last time I reviewed all of the different ways that Bastions work. If you're not familiar, check out that video first. First thing I'm going to look at is player and DM goals. And these are going to be different for you versus me and our best friend and that random person on the internet. Always true. But, you know, what are the goals that a DM or player has for something like this, right? Like I, as a DM, I really care about the sort of story part of things. And even as a player, while I do like to optimize a bit and I like to kind of look at the numbers and crunch some things and come up with something advantageous, sure, I do that. I also really want to express my individuality as a player and as my character. I want that whatever this structure does to represent me, right? A system like Strongholds and Followers really tries to go into that. And this version in the 2024 DMG doesn't super do that, right? So our goals may or may not be matched by this. I talked about what's awesome last time. When I look at the rules as they arrive, they have sort of one thing in mind. They have a vision for what a Bastion is. They push that vision forward. It's fairly well supported for that vision, but it isn't super flexible. As DMs, as players, we can always create, we can always change, but out of the box, as it presents it, it's got a unique view of what it does, right? When you set up a garden, that garden grows very specific things. You can change it, but out of the box, it is telling you what a garden grows, and it's only those things and only with those benefits. And it has no additional kind of story hooks. It's not trying to give you, you know, this idea of what it's like to take your herbs to market or your poisons somewhere to sell or anything like that. That is completely on you to do. So when I look at 2024, I find it to be a very particular type of system, even opinionated, I might say, rather than one that's flexible and open and trying to work for lots of different types of players and DMs. The benefits are a big part of this, right? And so are they the right benefits? Are you as DM looking for structures and a Bastion system overall that does this, that gives you the things that this system does, right? So for example, if someone has a stables, what's the benefit you want out of that? When I think of like that question, I think of like, oh, people who visit and they, you know, want to stable up for the night and I get to meet them and interact with them. Or maybe I kind of have like a contest of what my horses can do. If I'm truly like growing horses, right? If like, it's not just a stable to store things, but I'm like into like the equestrian business, that is a total different story angle I'm looking at. When I look at the rules, this is a place to store things. Yes, store mounts. But it's really about selling those mounts. And there's nothing that lets me make my mount better or cool or makes me a great horse breeder or horse trainer or anything like that. It's kind of made to sell and buy mounts and do it every other turn, because otherwise You're not getting the benefit out of it. So it becomes a gold farm. And to me, this is very video gaming, very on, off, and limited in nature. So the benefits aren't the right ones in that case. Some of the structures, like the ones that give you, 3 pieces of information or let you cast legend lore or kind of a neat, useful charm, I like a little better. I find that those benefits are cool. So what would I do as DM? I would look at each structure. I would see whether those benefits fit the kind of game I have, and I would change them. So, of course, we can all do that. That's work that the 2024 DMG is putting on us to change up those benefits. And we're going to look at the benefits a little more closely, especially the astounding financial benefits of it. A big thing for me is it the right kind of creative play and the right kind of stories. When we wrote the AC Inc. book, one of the things that we did was to make it really, really flexible, right? Even though we had to kind of tell the tale of an Acquisition Incorporated franchise, right? If you look at the way that the AC Inc. live plays are versus, say, the C team, they are very different in how they approach being an organization and the kinds of benefits they have. So we wanted that kind of flexibility. In the Acquisitions Incorporated system, you get to tell and work with the DM and the other players to say, what is our place? Is it a guild hall? Is it a assassin's headquarters? Is it a mercantile operation? Is it a league of gentlemanly scholars? Is it a wizard's emporium? Is it whatever? You can come up with any idea. And that's what your franchise is. That's what your stronghold or bastion is in the AC Inc. system. You just decide what it is. What that lets you do is create the kinds of stories you want at the table, right? And as DM, you can use this system whenever someone brings up a particular creative idea. One that I've seen happen a lot of times is someone says, hey, could I start a business of X, right? Like, could I build a library? Could I run a tavern? Could I start an information network that works with all of the street urchins in town to like get information from the nobles and the guilds and the other people, and then maybe I sell that to others? And with the 2024 DMG system, you can't really do that. Like, it really says to you, hey, it's 5th level. Now you can build a stronghold that has 2 basic structures and 2 special facilities per character, and your options are X, Y, Z. You get these 9 options, and that's what you can do. And if your dream isn't expressed by that, you can't do it. A great example is that whole idea of I want to build a tavern. Well, I'm sorry, you have to be 9th level, 9th, 13th, I forget, I have to check, let's see. You have to be 13th level to build a pub. So, if you're like 5th level characters, you cannot use, as written, the stronghold, the Bastion system to have a pub. You must be 13th level. And it isn't that you just have a pub, you have the pub being one of 25 or 30, I forget how, I think it's 25 structures at that level, right? So it's outshined, and you can only have one pub, and so there's a lot of this that the system behind Bastions is made with a very particular opinionated view. It's not flexible in that way. Can you make the changes? Absolutely, right? If someone said to me, hey, I want to start a tavern, I would rip that pub out of there and say, that is your one structure, and we're just going to use only that, and here's how I'm going to change it. But now I'm homebrewing. The system doesn't do that for me. All right. So personalization, an important part to me of these kinds of cool things. Or when you imagine, like, if I open up the old Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook and it says when you reach, 9th level, you get to be a lord and you get to have a castle and you attract followers. I want to break out paper and draw maps of what it looks like. And you can still do that with 2024. But I also want to begin crafting stories about who are these people that I employ and what does this place do and where is it? And a lot of what's here fights that. The personalization angle, while it certainly can be added, is not encouraged, right? It's not saying to me, hey, you have a stables. What do your stables do? It tells you it buys mounts and it sells them every other round the way a video game would, right? Or it says your library can produce 3 types of lore. This is the rules for that, and we're done, right? It has this very kind of plug and play. What you see is what you get. Definitive kind of angle to it, rather than open storytelling, personalized approach to things. So, what to do about that? Well, move beyond what's here, I think, right? Personalize it, make it yours, work as DM, work to add extra pieces here, and as player as well, to take that on and say, hey, we're going to have really a lot of fun with this. So let's personalize it. Let's add more to this. You're making a pub, you named your special brew. Tell me about the other normal brews, and what are the names of your wait staff, and just work that all out to make it important. And as DM, things like, what are the kinds of people who tend to frequent this tavern, and just work in those pieces to make them cool, right? One way to do this is, after any campaign turn, consider adding a story to one of the structures, right? Here are the kinds of people, the clientele has changed at your tavern. Here's why, and here's what's going on. What do you want to do about it, right? Just little bits like that, and just ratchet through every turn a little bit of a story for another. And it just can be something that you could say in a few sentences, but that causes the players to think, react, tell you a bit, right? A huge question is, does this fit campaigns and the typical cadence of play in a campaign? So let's say I take Storm King's Thunder, right? In this adventure, we begin in a town. In fact, one of them has a couple of them have options for businesses you could build there. Like, I have a brewery, right, in this Golden Fields type place, and that could be really neat. Except I'm immediately leaving that place, and I will never come back to that starting adventure. And when I hit 5th level, I'm probably nowhere near there. I'm moving across the landscape, and I'm not in any one place. And for the rest of the adventure, I'm going to keep moving. So where do you put your Bastion? Yes, you could just put it somewhere and come back to it, but the story is not meant to do that. The story is made to move you all over the place. If I go to Tomb of Annihilation and I'm running that adventure, of course I could put a base in Chult, but then I'm going to be in dungeons, and I'm going to be out in the jungle. And while I can come back sometimes for a while, I can't at critical levels of play, right? And that makes a real big difference. For example, let's take a look at this structure behind the Rime of the Frostmaiden Icewind Dale adventure. Chapters 1 to 4, you're in town. Chapter 1, levels 1 to 4, you're in town. This is before we can have a stronghold. At level 5, we are able to build a stronghold, and guess what? You are now adventuring on the fringes of Icewind Dale. Yeah, you can still come back, but you've headed outside of the towns. Then, and here we get into spoilers, so avert your eyes if you have not read this and are going to play it in the future. But you are now going to get onto even further out and deal with this threat to your towns, which may actually destroy some of those towns. And when you get to level 7, you're going actually to go handle the biggest story threat. And then you're going to these caves, and from those caves, you could end up kind of never coming back. If you've seen the end, you know what I'm talking about. So, when you get your 9th level features, right? You're like, yay, our stronghold hit level 9. We get additional features. You don't get back, and you might never get back. Again, if you know the adventure's end. So it's wild how much this doesn't fit strongholds, right? The bulk of strongholds will happen, your 5th level will happen after you kind of stop being in town. Your level 9 will happen at a point when you're nowhere near your Bastion. That's rough, right? Like, it just doesn't work. And, we could say oh yeah, this is all about Rime of the Frostmaiden, but you take almost any of these adventures, and the truth is that the levels don't work. We have, the system is hard-coded certain levels into it for Bastions as a system that don't match actually the play of a lot of the adventures. Trollskull Manor in the Waterdeep adventure, right? You are going to get this before your 5th level, and it is a tavern, but a tavern is a 13th level benefit in Bastions. I don't know why the team chose to make it start at 5th. I don't know why they chose this structure kind of approach, but they did. And it makes it inflexible and hard to fit into their existing adventures. In Spelljammer, it's not clear that I can build a stronghold on a ship. It probably won't fit in terms of its size, but that would actually make a lot of sense because I'm running a Spelljammer campaign. I need to be able to, like, use the benefits of it. And the natural concept is that I would put it on my ship, but I probably can't fit it because of the size, and it has to go somewhere else. And there are a lot of adventures like this, right? If it's Dragonlance, I mean, we're moving across that whole map, right? So even though it would make so much sense in a war kind of campaign to have a Bastion, it doesn't really work easily that way. The best way to make it work in these kinds of campaigns, so if you're forced to do this, well, you've got to give some sort of remote way that you can contact, so you can give orders. And that actually can be a really nice story angle, right? To turn this into a positive, by reaching remotely out to your Bastion, then you could hear about what's going on back home. And take Dragonlance, for example, if you know the story of that adventure, hearing how things are going could actually be really cool. If you can reach back to kind of the troops and the forces and your friends, it could actually keep you really nicely connected. And actually could have changed even how the adventure was written if you did it around that, because you would be able to stay in touch with your Bastion and do cool things with it while you're away. That could actually be super fun. The team has said it for the Wizards team that they will try to in the future have adventures reflect Bastions. I'm really looking forward to see that, because I think it is important for subsystems to be reinforced to exist in their adventures. One of the things that weakened downtime, very few adventures referred to downtime, so DMs didn't use it a whole lot or didn't feel comfortable with it, and now we see it's gone from 2024. And that's a real shame, because this idea of doing things in between adventures is super cool, fertile ground for great creative play. The last thing I want to look at on my list of issues is the concept of gold. And we're going to dig into this in quite some detail. We even heard folks from Wizards say that the Bastion rules will help you use excess gold if DMs said they have too much gold in their campaign. It doesn't really do that. Outside of a group that really wants to build a wall around their Bastion, that does consume a fair bit of gold initially. But this is a system that gives you gold, gives you magic, gives you stuff. It's not a system that uses up gold. And I think that while it's okay to make some gold, I would rather it be a little more risky, right? A little more like either the franchise system where you have to roll to see how your place fared every turn, or Forbidden Lands, where it says, hey, you may have to repair after an attack and it costs you gold, or you may have to sell these items in order to make another thing that you want to create, right? Those things, to me, those kinds of systems are a little more interesting. And I'm using my gold up to build, to do things, to invest in it, and then see it play out in some way, offer some benefit, especially a story one. I find that a lot of players will use gold for a story benefit if that story is meaningful, if they feel they can get things done with it. The bulk of the facilities here are just going to do things on their own. There's no input needed. That to me it lessens the value of this system and means that you have these piles of gold now even more than before with little to do. How much gold? Let's look at that. So let's start by looking at the magic item rules that I've gathered together in the Adventure Tools spreadsheet. My Adventure Encounter Monster Design tools are something I make available to Patreon supporters. Thank you, everybody who supports these videos, Success in RPGs, my blog, and lots of other creations that I take on. So here you can see some pulled together kind of ways that characters are benefiting from magic items and rewards over time. For example, how many magic items you get in each level. The treasure hoard system. And one thing that was really interesting for me as I crunched these numbers this week is seeing how much gold does the 2024 DMG expect us to give out compared to 2014? And the answer is a significant amount more than before. It's a little hard to parse the rules, and these rules won't fit every campaign. I can say they would not fit my campaign. But if you look here, the way it works in 2024 is that it says you're going to assign hordes when there's a bunch of monsters, right? So if you go into the Goblin Caves, they have a horde, right? They might have individual. If you find two goblins on the road, or 10 or however many, they just have individual treasure. But when they're in their lair, they have some amount of gold. And the expectation that we have, and then you can see some summaries here, is that we're going to have a random treasure hoard roughly once per game session, right? And above level, they say actually when you're, they kind of talk about how often you will level and how many hoards you're expected per level. So we can use that to estimate the amount of hoards and gold that the system expects you to get. The value of the hoard is based on your maximum CR. So I use the adventure designer to see, well, what kind of encounters will we have and what's the max possible CR? So that's what created all of this table. And what you can see is the amount in a hoard is pretty significant. And because we're generally getting about 2.5, 2, or 1 hoard, depending on the level of the characters, you end up with a lot of gold you're bringing in. A first level party could get 500 gold from finding 2 different, or actually 1 different hoard, 1 hoard. And the same thing for second level. But then they're going to actually have 2.5 hoards on average. The CR is much higher, and they could have 11,000 gold per level from levels 3 to 5. So you see the total gold gain becomes really quite huge. 6th level, 124,000. If we assume 4 characters in a party, which seems to kind of be the assumption for a lot of the 2024 math, that tells you each PC at level 6 has 31,000 gold. I don't know about you, these numbers are way higher than what I tend to give out in my campaigns. And actually, a lot of the published adventures tend to be a lot lower than this amount. But this is the guideline the game seems to be built on. At high levels, the numbers become very high, right? 330,000 gold in each hoard on average. And that adds up, because you have 2 hoards per level at these levels, you end up having a lot more gold. The end result is that each PC can have more than 1,700,000 gold at level 20, which is, I don't know what you do with that gold. And you certainly don't put it into a Bastion, because a Bastion doesn't use up much gold. It gives you more gold. So that's statement A, right? The 2024 rules are even higher. And let's look at 2014 actually as a comparison. You can see here that 1.7 million is only 800,000 per PC at level 20. You're gaining 672,000 gold at the highest levels and in a level. And that's 660, so that's not too far off. But before that is 90,000, right? And so you can see these differences. The early levels are quite different in how much gold you're getting, 500 instead of 376, and so on. So it makes a real big difference. 4,500 in these middle levels. And here it's 4,400 and then 36,000, right? So 36,000 between levels 6 to 10 compared to these 4,500 values, right? So it's almost like it slid, the math slid upwards to the next tiers, right? So it's a lot, right? There is a lot more gold kind of seeming to be intended by the game. And this doesn't count Bastions. So let's take a look at this. And the impact of this is going to really vary on your campaign. If you're a campaign that's like those rules, well, then maybe it's not too bad. But if your campaign is more like mine, where there's a lot less gold in the system, Bastion's kind of hard code generating a lot of gold. How much depends on the facilities they choose to build and an understanding of the rules behind them. When I first read the 2024 Bastion rules, I thought to myself, hey, yeah, I've got 2 special facilities at 5th level. No big deal. And then I realized that's per character. Oh, if I have 5 characters in my party, they're building 10 facilities. Well, which 10 are they going to build? So to do that, probably the easiest thing to do is click here on my formula, and you can see what shows up as the best. A workshop can generate 62.6 gold per week, per turn of 7 days. A smithy, 68.18 per week, which is the highest. And the garden, which you can have more than one of, can do 50. So if we decide as players to just make gold, right? Just get, 1 workshop, 1 smithy, when the rest of our facilities are going to be gardens, we can make 530.78 gold per week, per turn. Yes, we have to be in our facility to do that. So it becomes a little harder at 5th level to do that. But again, it depends on what we do. We talked about this last video, that it makes a lot of sense to sort of say, hey, you guys were gone for 3 weeks adventuring, but now you're going to rest for 3 weeks, roll out those turns. And you're like, great, we just got 1,500 gold, right? Because we just spent 3 weeks churning out all these. And maybe you don't do quite that much, right? But it can still be a really high amount if you choose some of these gold making facilities. When we get to level 9, it gets even higher, 2,870. And you can see the why of it. You get now to build a total of 20 facilities if you have 5 characters. And they may look at these and go, hey, all of these 9th levels that let you craft magic items. Well, an uncommon magic item, I can make 200 gold off of it. And the greenhouse lets me sell poisons for 200 gold. Really 400 gold, but you get half. The laboratory for 150, the sacristy, right? Like all these different options. Even the trophy room at 50, right? I could do that. And where it really goes bonkers is when you reach the 15th level. Because at 15th level, I can have the stables really producing a bunch. And you can have any number of stables. The stables produce 600 gold a week. So even though one storehouse is 1250, I can only build one of those. But I can have 24 stables churning out all this wealth. And I end up with 15,650 a week. A week. How many weeks are there in the campaign? I don't know, but that's a lot of gold, right? And at the 17th level, 37,350, right? So that is pretty wild. And what I tried to do, and then, let me first kind of show you, you saw some of these, you can see kind of the comparison, right? That it really varies wildly between structure, how much they generate. And you see some like common, okay, yeah, all of these generate 200, and then one generates 150, and another one 73.5, like the gaming hall. It is really interesting how much it varies. When you get to look at the whole picture together, here's the assumption I made. The horde system with gold is expecting you to go to a certain number of hordes per level, right? Like 1 at level 1, 1 at level 2, about 2 to 3 at levels 3 to 10, right? That's the number of hordes. Well, hordes are like a big layer. So to me, that's sort of like a big story point, and probably you would go home after that. So if we kind of say that the number of hordes is equal to these, this got rounded up, but it's actually 2.5. If we're going to, kind of 2.5 times in that level, we are going to end a major, cleared out the bandit caves, finish the dungeon of the cultists, whatever it is. We're probably going to go back and do a turn. So it's not a lot of turns that I'm assuming here. If we just do 3 turns at 5th level, we are making 1,327 gold, which is 12% that we're adding to the expected amount of gold that you would have gained this level. And if we look at the higher levels, we see it can vary, right? Sometimes as these values become huge of what an expected horde is, well, then it's just like a 1% bump, and it's not that much. But then we get an 8% bump, an 8% bump, 5%, and the last levels are actually 11% as you just really have these big amounts, 37,350 gold pieces per turn for each of the hordes. But all this assumption is really, we just have a few turns, as you can see this. If you have many more turns, like if your campaign plays out week after week after week across levels, then this number will be much higher. For example, when I ran Tomb of Annihilation, I ran that adventure as a 2-year campaign. We still ended at 10th level. And a lot of times in a level, we had many weeks of play, moving around the jungle, doing all kinds of things. And we were sending remote instructions to our facilities. I use the franchise system, but the players were sending remote instructions for what they wanted their facility to do. If that had been the Bastion system, there would have been many, many weeks of generating all of this gold which would have been way beyond the gold that this adventure awarded. So when it comes to gold, I think Bastions in 2024 have the opportunity to be pretty disruptive. How disruptive is going to greatly vary on the number of turns, how much gold you're already giving out. And it can happen both ways, right? Maybe if you're giving out this kind of amount of gold, then maybe a 12% increase and every now and then 1% and 8 and so on might not be a big amount. But if you are doing a lot less than this, then this percentage increases drastically. And this could be very substantial to have this much gold given out. So what to do about that? Well, you could go in and change up all these values. Or you could say that the things can't be sold, right? So all of these items that make magic items, let you craft arcane magic items and sell them, you could say these are items you need to use, not sell. Or that a seller is only available, a purchaser is only available very rarely, or require some kind of other criteria. I don't know. I wanted to add a bit more because one of the options that's available is actually in the DMG, and a Patreon Discord member provided this, and it's a really fantastic idea, which is that the DMG has a section on marks of prestige, and this includes various things that your character be granted, including a fortification. And those actually have a cost to them per day. So if you look at the fortification type, an outpost or watch tower, to maintain it, if it's given to you, costs 50 gold. A keep or small castle, 100 gold per day. And a large castle or fortress is 400 gold per day. So that's per day. If we turned it into a turn, right, which is what Bastions use, and we multiply that out by 7 for the turn is a 7-day, regardless of how long your week is. So that becomes 350, 700, or 2,800. And what we could say is that, at lower levels, like in your levels 5 to 9, maybe, your cost could be 350. And then you could decide when it becomes large enough to be considered a keep or small castle. And now it would be 700. And then it could be a large castle or fortress at the later levels, like 13 and 17. What this does is allow you to subtract this out from the gold that's coming into the operation. So if at levels 5 you would be bringing in 530 maximum, well, you subtract 350 out from that. And at level 9, you subtract 700 out from that. You might even phase it in or reduce this depending on how much the players are optimizing the production. So if they really aren't making much gold at all, hey, make it something small, like 50 gold per turn. But if they are really, really trying to make tons and tons of gold, and that would be destructive to your game, a great option is to do this, right? Add these costs that are in the actual DMG itself, and you could even give a discount. Or you could make things sort of interesting by saying that, any given turn or month, the costs could vary up or down some amount, and just create a quick table of how much it varies that month and come up with a story reason for it that would actually tie into things. Or maybe tie it to the events table. And when an event takes place, then this drives a slight variation in how much it costs to run the place. And that could be a fun way of altering it, so it's not just static math every time. So I really like this as a solution. If you're going to use Bastions kind of as is, and you want to reduce that amount of gold, then you could use the actual fortification cost in the DMG. So thank you so much for pointing that out. It's honestly not the kind of system that I favor, right? I'm not looking for wealth generation or churning out magic items or any of that. I'm looking for story angles. And to me, these facilities could have awesome study pieces, right? Like the observatory that lets you kind of stare off into the stars and foretell the future is awesome. But that is just contact other plane as a spell. I would like a lot more story behind it. And you can obviously insert that, but the rules aren't doing that for us. So there you have my thoughts on the Bastion system. It is not my favorite system I've seen for these reasons. Like I said in the first video, and that all that is true, it could be awesome. It could be a lot of fun to play with these angles. But for me, for my style of play, I want a heavier story tie-in. If you look at the adventure that shows up in Kingdoms of Warfare, you will get kind of the idea of what the kind of concepts are that I'm looking for. And same thing if you look in Acquisitions Incorporated at the story and adventure that's in here. My view of what I would like from a Bastion system is to really start with the player questions. What are the characters trying to create? What kind of business, enterprise, organization, agency, group do they want to have? Are they building a tavern? Are they starting an assassin's guild? Are they starting a arcane, artifact museum? Like, whatever that is, I want them to come up with the cool idea and then deploy it, right? They're a merchant guild and they are going to be selling to all kinds of places. And then I want the facility, the bastion, whatever you want to call it, to further that story-wise. I want the components that are in it to work off of that, right? So to me, a stables that's about selling and buying horses becomes just a video gamey kind of on-off thing of gold generation, when actually I don't want to generate gold with this bastion. I want to have the characters spend their gold and get something cool out of it. Like, for example, the ability to move quickly across the places because they have these awesome horses. So maybe they can travel faster, or maybe because they have a bastion, they get really interesting guests all the times and can make interesting alliances with people. Maybe the local lords come to them because they need horses for their armies, and that creates a whole kind of negotiation thing. And maybe that impacts later when a huge villain comes in and they need to do something. They can say, hey, armies that we allied with, we gave you all those horses and all that from our stables. Could you, take off the eastern flank so we as a group can go to the western flank or straight to the Amni or whatever it is, right? Like, that's the kind of stuff that I want to work on. And to me, when we put this together in the Acquisitions Incorporated franchise system, we worked to get past these kinds of issues, story barriers, and to make it more flexible. That's what I'm looking for in general from a Bastion system. Can you use 2024's Bastion system? Absolutely. Like I said in the first video, it can be a lot of fun. But I think that it will work for certain groups and not for others because of the limited way that it was written. So I hope to see games continue to come up with new ideas. I showed off Forbidden Lands and Strongholds and Followers and Kingdoms and Warfare. So I hope that we keep seeing new entrants into this space with better, richer takes on how to create a stronghold. It's nice to see it in the 2024 rules, but for me, it doesn't get quite to where I'd want it to. I hope this video has been fun for you. I hope that's been thought-provoking. It's absolutely okay if we don't agree. That's fine. If this is the perfect system for you, then I'm happy. Like, that's the best thing. If I'm the only person who doesn't like this system, cool, that's good. I can yell at the clouds and everybody else can be super happy. But I hope it's at least been thought-provoking as to the design behind it and what we see as different possible options, how this operates. And if you are going to use the system, hopefully you can benefit from thinking through the amount of gold, how it relates to the expectations of the core game's gold dispensing rules and math, and then that you can maybe use some of this to maybe alter your campaign in a way that makes the Bastion system more likely to work for you, or at least you're aware of the possible pitfalls. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you to everybody who makes these videos possible. I'll see you next time.